All right, it's Monday, the 14th of December. It's nearly 9 o'clock. I thought I'd do a short piece, just introduction to a video I found by Jeff Gasley and on boundaries and how to deal with repressed emotion. It's useful in terms of healers and empaths who pick up other people's emotions sometimes without realizing it and tend to not express their own emotion. Sometimes just express other people's for them without even realizing it, that the emotion they're expressing doesn't belong to them. But this one is particularly about how to set boundaries, how to express emotion assertively, and how to assert yourself in an appropriate way in situations at work and in the family and such like. So it's about 38 minutes long. It's worth playing in its entirety, I think. So I'll do that, and I'll just sit and watch.
Communication is an art form. People get very little training or practice with communication in this culture. In fact, feelings are not even recognized as something good or natural. Oftentimes in Western culture, people are told that not feeling is the best thing, which is really too bad, because a complete human being has a number of different inputs in which to ascertain reality. There's an intellectual input which consists of thinking and taking in what the world is saying and coming up with concepts about what is happening. There are also feelings which give incredible information and actually energy. So emotions are about energy. What I want to focus on is how to be assertive, to communicate and deal with conflict resolution in an appropriate way. That is only possible by establishing good boundaries. Assertiveness is about people standing up for themselves and communicating without putting someone else down. The body is in homeostasis or balance, and that's where people like to operate from as human beings. There is an interflow that happens, so when people breathe in, they go out of balance. When they breathe out, they reestablish balance. Emotions operate in the same way. One feels an emotion, and if it's not expressed, the person will not return back to homeostasis. The energy from the feeling has got to go somewhere, and it often gets funneled into a somatic symptom, such as a stomachache, or built up in the system in some other way. A common example of this phenomena is called the percolator effect. For those who are under 30 and don't know what a percolator is, it's an old-style coffee pot that you put on a stove or plug into an electrical socket. And the pressure builds and the water circulates, and it brews the coffee. The example I'm going to relate is a very traditional 1950s example that is unfortunately still common today. Imagine the following scenario. A guy who goes off to work and he misses the bus. And he's angry about that. Therefore, the energy has taken him out of balance. But he doesn't really know what to do about that. Now, if he believes that he needs to be perfect and in control, which a lot of people in this society believe, his tendency will be to take that energy, push it down, and try to just handle it. Essentially, that energy and feeling get dissociated or separated from the conscious mind. The person really thinks he is taking care of the emotion, but it is still within his body, and therefore it is still affecting him. He could blame somebody else, even though there's nobody around at that time, but even if he could displace the emotion, it would not really dissipate. He is late for work and the boss yells at him, but our fellow doesn't realize it's not a black and white situation. In other words, he could turn around at most jobs and tell the boss that he didn't like the way he was being treated because of the boss's tone of voice, but that he was sorry that he was late and there was no excuse for that. What our guy does is just stuffs the feeling one more time. Now, instead of one bit of energy, he's got two bits of energy that are stuck in his body, doing damage and wanting some kind of discharge. Later on in the day, a coworker doesn't do what he wants, so underneath his breath, he curses at her, just enough for the woman to hear, but not enough for her to hear distinctly. He thinks he's gotten out some of the anger. However, unless it's done in an assertive way, clean from mind-altering chemicals, one-on-one and directly, no energy really dissipates. Just a small amount leaks out the side in a passive-aggressive way. Now he misses lunch, traffic is heavy, so he's late getting home, and at each stage, he's pushing emotions down. He gets home, he says, "Hun, where's dinner?" And she says it'll be about 15 minutes, and he blows up, yelling and screaming, taking the opportunity to get all this out on his wife and his kids. This is a very traditional thing that tends to happen in this society, unfortunately. It is called inappropriate expression of anger or displaced aggression. The person is really angry at one person, but he takes it out on somebody else because he can't hold on to it anymore. Or he subconsciously thinks it's safer to show it to the family. It is not safe with the family. That's the most cherished part of anyone's life, and the one a person should want to be most careful about. If a person acts in this kind of fashion on a day-to-day basis, what tends to happen is they remain chronically out of homeostasis or balance. The person feels a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress on a daily basis. Psychosomatic illnesses are more likely to occur. The body and the mind are connected, they're not separate. Therefore, if a person feels sad or some other emotion, they have a physical manifestation for that particular emotion. Oftentimes, people use substances to try to handle the emotion, to keep it down a little bit more. However, using alcohol or drugs block the expression of real feeling and the energy still remains. Eventually, any unresolved emotions, especially anger, turns against the self and becomes depression. Millions of people are walking around in a state that is out of balance emotionally. Feelings are neither good nor bad, they're neutral. When something important occurs in a person's world, he or she is going to have both a thought and a feeling about what has happened. If one is angry, that's a perfectly natural emotion. That recognition of being angry allows the person to take care of themselves. It allows them to establish good boundaries. However, the way that a person shows anger might be good or bad. If a person is angry at someone and hits them over the head with a 2x4, that is bad. But if a person just tells the other person that he is angry in an assertive, appropriate way, that actually is helpful. There are hundreds of different feeling states. If we look at anger, which is often one of the most difficult emotions for people to express and get over, one starts out feeling perturbed or irritated. In the middle of the continuum, a person might be angry. At the end, they might be irate or homicidal or livid. Each emotion has several different gradations. Unfortunately, in our culture, the emotions that are commonly discussed are few. People say they feel okay, bad, good, or upset. That doesn't really communicate anything meaningful. I don't know if a person is upset because he or she is angry or upset because of feeling hurt. With the acceptance of therapy, people more readily talk about feeling anxious and depressed, but don't do well talking about the gradations of emotions. And usually, people don't talk about much more than anger or sadness. Some of the primary feelings are hurt, frustrated, jealous, envious, shamed, betrayed, rejected, ignored, and shunned. Those so-called negative emotions don't feel pleasant when people feel them, even though they're important and impart good information. They all eventually will turn to anger, which is a secondary emotion. Anger, if it's not expressed, can then turn inward, resulting in depression. So if a person is angry at someone, he or she can't wait until they leave. Once gone, he or she will think of all the things they should have said, then start damning themselves because they didn't say them at the appropriate time. So the anger turns against the self, and the other person has probably forgotten the incident and is doing absolutely fine. In our culture, although it's changing, females traditionally have had a problem talking about anger. Men, on the other hand, have had a problem talking about hurt, as if the different sexes had different emotions, which is patently untrue. There are three forms of communication. The first occurs when that coffee pot is building up. It's passive-aggressive and it comes from a childhood position. It's characterized by being dishonest, pouting, blaming another person for feelings that that person experiences, such as saying, "You made me feel." It's not being direct, being sarcastic, and is very manipulative. This type of behavior is very passive-aggressive, and when somebody is treating a person this way, that person feels slapped in the face or ambushed. It's a real physical feeling, but there's nothing the person can really grab onto. If the injured party asks the person, "Are you angry?" they'll say no. They said no, but their words said no. Their tone and body posture said yes. But since it's confusing, the tendency will be to stop the confrontation. Usually this form of communication paralyzes any meaningful dialogue. When a person can't hold on to the emotion anymore, they tend to blow up. The communication has become aggressive, which is acting like a critical parent. It's judging a person by one thing that the person does. If somebody is late and a person jumps on them and calls them a lazy, inconsiderate person, that's about personhood, not behavior. In reality, anyone can be late once in a while, and generally be on time. It would make more sense to say, "I thought that was a very lazy thing to do," or an inconsiderate thing to do. This type of confrontation is about behavior and not personhood, and thus is more accurate. If a person hits somebody, labels somebody, calls names, or starts sentences with the word "you," it's a one-up, one-down position, and therefore it's an attack, and the tendency will be for the other person to get defensive. When someone has been aggressive, it's as if they've hit a person over the head with a stick or punched that person in the face. When a person feels attacked, they plug their ears because if it started out that way, it's only going to get worse. Then the person will often lean back and think of the weakest point that the other person has and bring up what happened 20 years ago and try to hit the other person that way. This causes a fight, and true communication is again thwarted. Passive-aggressive communication is characterized by running from a conflict. Aggressive communication results in getting into a fight outright. The only real way that a person has a chance of communicating well is the assertive way. The assertive way is the adult way. It's open, honest, direct, and equal. The goal for the communicator is to try to inform the person how she or he feels and thinks. It's taking care of the self with good boundaries and without doing any harm or offending anyone else. That's the purpose of it. It is very adult. And in our culture, teaching adult behavior has not been common because in dysfunctional families, poor communication and authoritativeness is the norm. The way to craft an assertive statement is by saying, I think,